He worked in Evansville and Terre Haute at various TV stations before joining WLFI here in Lafayette 6 years ago. He's married to Liz, who he met at work, I assume. She's now at Purdue. And they have one daughter who will be 3 years old on June 30th. And they've got a little baby boy that's supposed to be here May the 13th. And he's also... Say again?
It's looking much sooner now.
Oh, looking sooner, okay.
I'm saying early May now.
Okay, all right. He's also got a big Alaskan Husky, and the Husky helps take care of everybody at home. So, Chad, it's an honor to have you here. We'll turn it over to you.
Well, I should be familiar with these mics, given I put these on every day. There we go. Is that right?
Yep.
And they always tell me at work, don't bend the wire at the end there. You're going to break it. So I'm really careful with these mics. Because a lot of our mics have broken that way at work. And I guess they're really pricey to replace. So engineering always tells me, don't bend that wire at the top. I'm going to get my clicker, wherever it may be. A laser pointer, a clicker, do we have one? If we don't, that's okay.
Yeah, we do.
I can point. You know what? I point to weather maps every day, so I'm good.
Got the clicker on the green though.
What's that?
Clicker I thought I had would not work.
Oh, okay, that's okay. That's not a problem. I'm in good shape.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in any trouble.
You're not in any trouble. We're debugging. You're debugging us. Okay. This is.
That's okay. You didn't know I was going to be high maintenance today, did you? Well, I'll kind of intro this PowerPoint. I'm a big, I love weather and climate. I'm a big weather history guy, and I like reconstructing past weather events. And what I've done since college is look at old diaries.
I think part of the problem is that's been brought up on email
Oh, okay.
as opposed to regular PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
no
it's
sweat.
working just like your pointer.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem. I can
We
point.
can advance it for you. Just tell us when to advance it, he'll do it for you.
Okay, not a problem. So I've researched weather diaries, county histories, old newspapers on microfilm, you name it, and try to reconstruct severe weather events during the European settlement period to look for any trends in severe weather in our area. I found some really interesting things. And this presentation today, it's going to be Indiana severe weather history prior to 1852, because there's an event in 1852 that was too neat. I had to include it in the presentation today. So we'll start with the first slide. The earliest sign of any tornado in our viewing area, and in the state of Indiana, was actually in the 1580s. Now you say, well, how do you know that? There was a study done in the 1880s where a guy was walking through some virgin timber, uncut forest in Park, Montgomery, in Vermilion County, Indiana. And that area, a lot of those woods hadn't been cut yet. And what he found in about a mile-wide swath from Vermilion County, Indiana to Park County was an area where there were big mounds, huge mounds all over the forest. And on top of these mounds were gigantic trees. And some of these trees had begun to be cut. And these trees were 300 years old. And what they found was that the legend was that these big mounds in these forests that had never been cut were that they were Indian graves. That's what they called them, because they thought an Indian battle had taken there and Native Americans had been buried there. Well, actually, these big mounds they found in these pre-settlement forests were actually old tornado tracks, because what happens when you have a top-heavy tree with leaves and the soil's wet, a gigantic tree, a 300-year-old tree or so, will topple over, and you're left with a gigantic mound that could be as big as that huge corner of the room or larger. And the tree would decay, and then on top of the mound, a new tree would sprout. And on top of all these mounds, he found these 300-year-old trees. Well, he mapped all of it out, and it was a continuous track from near Clinton, Indiana to almost Crawfordsville. And again, almost a mile wide. And he found that, this was in a scientific newsletter, that all the mounds turned counterclockwise. And that it had to have been a tornado. And judging by the age of the trees on top of the mounds, it had to have been about 300 years ago, around the 1580s, when this large, probably violent tornado moved through this part of the state. And another thing that was interesting is the question was, how do the mounds stay there after such a long period of time? And in the study, they found that when you start farming ground, these mounds disappear very quickly. They erode very fast. When you keep leaves on top of them, and they're like shingles, they kind of keep the rain running off. But also, the height of the mound and how long it lasts is based on whether the tree's completely uprooted. A lot of times you have a tornado, they'll snap. A lot of the trees snap. Well, these were all uprooted, so we can glean that the trees were probably fully foliated, or the ground was incredibly wet, and most of the trees were uprooted. So that's the earliest recollection of some sort of tornado in Indiana. And the next slide, you can see that there was another tornado, another track of a tornado during the 1600s in Carroll County. And there was this track, I think she's running slow. This track in southern Carroll County near Burlington, there it is called Hurricane Creek. It's still called Hurricane Creek today. And it was a tangled swamp of these mounds again, of these Indian graves. And what they found was that in this tangled mass of swamp, thousands of beavers lived, but also a lot of the trees on these mounds were 200, 250 years old in the swamp. So it dated to at least before 1616 when this tornado passed through Carroll County. And you can see in the next slide the map that this tornado passed through, very close to Burlington, in those pre-settlement forests. Right there. Here's Burlington, here's 29, and there's the track. This is the Hurricane Creek area. August of 1795, Andre Michio was a botanist and naturalist that traveled through southern Indiana from Louisville to Vincennes on the Buffalo Trace. And he said that the toughest part of all his 10-year journeys in North America was that trip. He said there were thousands of trees overturned between Louisville and Vincennes, freshly turned trees. So in the next slide, what we can glean, this was his track, his travels, Louisville, Paoli, Lagodi, Washington to Vincennes, present day. There could have been a derecho or some sort of major severe weather event that affected this area at some point in the summer of 1795 to cause that. Next slide, we go a little farther in time. This is getting closer to the 1800 era. Several tornadoes around 1800. There's an area in Wabash County, a settlement that was called the Windbreak, and when settlers arrived there, they found a complete tangled mess of giant trees that had been toppled by a tornado about a quarter of a mile wide near North Manchester. In Gibson County near Hobstadt, there's an area called Hurricane Creek, and when settlers arrived, it looked like a hurricane had gone through. About a quarter mile wide, all the trees were torn up and broken. In Daviess County near Washington, there's still a little creek that goes to the east side of town called Hurricane Branch. Again, Europeans arrived there. They were kind of fascinated by this track of a tornado that went through around 1800. In Franklin and Montgomery County, there are two, and Marion counties, there are 3 zones that they call the fallen timber country. And all the timber in this path was about 20 years old. It was very young. And outside of this track that was a quarter to a half mile wide, all the trees were giant. So some sort of tornado went through there around 1800. This would have been around 1820 when this was found, and the timber in that track was about 20 years old. In Gibson County, a large tornado A settler actually saw this and wrote about it. In Edwards County, Illinois, a tornado crossed into Indiana. He actually watched it. A large tornado crossed into Indiana in, I think, June of 1805. Next slide shows these tracks, these various tracks from all these tornadoes that were mentioned. The one near North Manchester, the one in Gibson County, and the one in Daviess County, and then we had the others in central Indiana, Franklin, Montgomery, and Marion counties, as well as Gibson County. I think it'll go forward, perhaps. But a lot of tornado tracks at the time were called hurricane tracks, or creeks were named Hurricane Creek or Hurricane Branch or whatever it may be, because they found tornado tracks through the woods when first Europeans arrived in our area. The earliest really good recollection of tornadoes in Indiana was in 1814, and there were several tornado tracks in southern Indiana. Knox County, Daviess County, and Dubois County. I'll get to that shortly because I thought we were stuck for good. This is North Manchester. There's the tornado track around 1800 based on settler records. We'll go to the next one. This is the other track. This is Hopf, Indiana, US 41, Highway 68 if you're familiar with that area. I-64 is down here. And this is Hurricane Creek that's been ditched now, and this is the zone where the early settlers found the tornado track. Next one will show Washington, Indiana here. This is I-69, US 50. This is the Hurricane Branch area on the east side of town. This is, again, southwest Indiana. We'll go forward one more. And this is down in Franklin County. This is Oldenburg, Interstate 74. And this is, by the research I gathered, it was started near Oldenburg and went several miles northeast of town. Next one shows the track in the Indianapolis area. Around Fall Creek was this tornado track in the forest settlement. If this would happen today, this would be very, very damaging. This is such an urban area. See the airport down here, and that would be 465 to the left. The next one shows, finally, the Crawfordsville track. This was called the Fallen Timber Country, just south of Crawfordsville, where we found that massive tangle of trees at settlement. Next slide is the 1809 derecho. Some good numbers on this one. Some scientific papers were done on this in Cincinnati from early professors, and there was a lot of good diary keeping on this event. So 200 miles wide, 200 miles long, 50 to 60 miles wide, widespread is significant, even major wind damage. There's evidence of embedded tornadoes. It appears we may have had some tornado damage at Cincinnati, with 20 homes destroyed, and the Academy heavily damaged. We'll go to the next slide. You can see I mapped this out. So this is Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio, Columbus, Indiana, Indianapolis, and this is the 200-mile wide track. And this is the swath of significant wind damage that occurred with that. It was reported that visibility was zero and the forests were just leveled when this thing blew through. Next slide, 1812. Now, these tornadoes were in western Ohio, and we had damage to some early pioneer cabins and big paths cut through forests. Now, why am I mentioning this tornado if it's only Ohio tornadoes that are mentioned? Well, if we go to the next slide, the pioneers mentioned that in these two tornado tracks, again, here's Indianapolis, they found American chestnut branches, Virginia pine, bald cypress, and mountain laurel in the path of these tornadoes. So debris and tree species from Indiana were caught up in probably long-track tornadoes and deposited in western Ohio. And you've seen stories like that where a letter, a canceled check, will be found 150 miles away from a tornado. So the closest American chestnuts are in south central Indiana. The closest bald cypress is in southwest Indiana. And Virginia pine was native to the Louisville area at that time. So obviously, there were probably tornadoes in Indiana that day. Debris was found in Ohio. Next slide. This is the earliest really detailed severe weather event in Indiana. Numbers, measurements, good reporting here. A lot of good data in newspapers. The Vincennes Sun had excellent data on this event. Several tornado tracks. One in northern Knox County along Maria Creek. There was another tornado track in southern Sullivan County, Indiana. I read in the history of Sullivan County, there was a pioneer family with a wagon in the southern part of that county, and they encountered this severe weather event. And giant hail completely destroyed their wagon, and they barely made it out alive. And nearby, they found a tornado track in a creek bottom. There was a tornado track not only in Gibson County, but also DuBois County. It was said in the DuBois County history, it went from one end of the county to the other and opened up a half-mile wide swath in a completely wooded county. Washington County, on the same date, a tornado went through, and that timber was called the Fallen Timber Country. And hail would not, one interesting thing I found in the Vincent Sun newspaper, one settler had a hailstone that would not fit in a pint tin cup. Well, that's 3.5 inches in diameter. That is big, big. These are big supercells. This was a big event. Also, one report from Shawneetown, Illinois, which is south, kind of southwest of Vincennes on the Wabash. You put two men's fists together, and that was the size of a stone they found. In the tornado that went through Gibson and DuBois County, I mentioned that the swath was up to half-mile wide, but there was one report that at times it was a mile wide. It was a very violent day. And John James Audubon, some of you might be familiar with him, he was a preeminent naturalist and ornithologist. And he, on this exact day, he was on horseback in western Kentucky, southwest of Evansville. And he wrote all about this. It's in a passage he wrote. He said he was on his horse riding through the woods, and he got off his horse to get a drink out of a creek, because where else are you going to get a drink of water back then? And he knelt down on his knees, and he got a drink with his hands like this. And he said he started hearing this murmuring, and it was thundering. He knew there was a storm brewing. And he got up on his feet like that after a drink, and he heard this noise, and he looked through the woods, and there was this, he said it was a yellowish oval mass to his southwest. And he said before he had really any time to realize what was going on, his quote was, "The giants of the forest were swaying back and forth." He said it was a fresh breeze, and he said within seconds, the whole forest, he said, was in frightful motion. And that one giant tree, you could hear it squeak against the other and creak. And then he said seconds later, right in front of him, chunks of tree are flying. Giants of the forest are being snapped. He's freaking out. He said he didn't even know. He said his quote was, and he had seen a lot, he said that it was the most, I forget how he put it, gut-wrenching thing he'd ever seen, most amazing thing he'd ever seen. And the tornado passed right, just in the woods down the way from him. And he said after it went through and it was raining, he didn't know what to do. Should he get back on his horse and go to Henderson, or should he just wait there? What should he do? It's wilderness mostly. So he decided to get back on his horse because he said he had business of imminent nature. I don't know what it was. I think he had a store in Henderson, Kentucky at that time. And got on his horse, and his quote was, he had innumerable difficulties getting back to Henderson. He said it was a tangled mass. He could not get through the path. It was really bad. He had to lead his horse. And he said after the tornado passed, the northeast sky was green colored, but the west was clearing up, which makes sense. It's a supercell thunderstorm. The back edge, it's going to clear up. And he said when he got to Henderson, it hadn't done anything. But people were kind of stirred up because limbs were falling out of the sky, and it hadn't rained, so debris had gotten hurled up. And from what we can tell, these are probably supercell storms. We had a supercell move through Union County, Kentucky, probably passed south of Henderson, threw some debris on Henderson. That's a long story, but violent day. Next slide, you can see the tornado tracks. This is, I think the next one is Knox County. One track in the northern part of the county, another track in the southern part of the county, and then the Gibson and DuBois County tracks as well. This is a fascinating event because it was the first event that I had so much detail on. I mean, Audubon, when he wrote about it, the detail was great. This is the DuBois track. This is probably the same supercell. This storm is the one that had the hail the size of 2 man's fists. This is the storm on Maria Creek. This passed through Patoka, along the Patoka River. This is where Audubon was. He was on horseback between Morgantown, which is Morganfield, Kentucky, and Henderson. And there's that track, and here's the Washington County track. Next slide. The next event, August 1818, Owen County. You'll notice a lot of these tornadoes are southern Indiana, because Indiana was settled from south to north by Europeans. Owen County, 3 miles south of Spencer, that's southwest of Indianapolis. 2 Potawatomis were nearly killed. The tornado came up so quickly, they were out gathering honey, and they had hidden in a hollow oak tree, and the forest fell all around them. They saw it coming. And there was also a tornado in the same month, it could have been the same day, in western Hendricks County. Next slide shows the tornado tracks. This is Spencer, Indiana, US 231. This takes you to Cloverdale and Greencastle. There's the track. The next track shows the Hendricks County tornado. This is North Salem, and here's the track south of there. This is 75 right here. The next event, 1819 Southern Rush County, called Hurricane Creek. And there was a church, and that church may still be there, called Hurricane Christian Church, and that's exactly where the tornado passed through back in 1819. You can see the map here in Rush County. This is Rushville, there's Highway 44, there's 52, this is Milroy, and I mapped out that tornado track. This is the Hurricane Creek area, and Hurricane Christian Church would have been there too. Next slide, 1820 tornadoes. You know, if you go to Brown County, Indiana, there's a hill called Weed Patch Hill. And it was called Weed Patch Hill because a tornado went over the hilltop and completely obliterated the timber. And it was said that for several years after that, it was just brush and almost looked like a prairie, and a thicket had grown there because the tornado completely scoured out that hill. And it's still called Weed Patch Hill. Harrison County, there was a guy on horseback going from Louisville to Paoli and found a 600 to 700 yard fresh tornado track. That'd be about almost a quarter of a mile wide, or almost a half mile wide. And he found that the Kentucky side of the Ohio River was completely obstructed by fallen timber from that tornado. You can see the map here. Weed Patch Hill is up here. This is Bloomington, Indiana. There's Brown County State Park. The next one shows, well, there was the tornado track near the Ohio River. Way down here, there's Louisville, and there's the track along the river. 1822, several other tornadoes, northwest Owen County near Cloverdale, 7 miles southwest of Cloverdale. There was a sawmill named for the fallen timber there from that tornado. It was called the Hurricane Steam Sawmill way back in the 1800s. You can still find that on old maps where that sawmill was, and you can see the track of it. Cloverdale would be just north there, 7 miles to the northeast of that tornado track, north of Interstate 70 there. 1823, I think, is the next one. Yeah, there's Cloverdale, and there's 42 and 231, and there's that former tornado track. 1823, I believe, is the next one in spring. Johnson County, northeast of Franklin. Again, we've got another Hurricane Creek. Hurricane Creek goes through Franklin. And also, at the same time, Randolph County, west-northwest of Winchester, we had a tornado. This is the city of Franklin. I-65, tornado started near Franklin, passed the Hurricane Creek area, and ended northeast of town. The other tornado, on the next slide, you can see was in Randolph County. I thought I had a map of that. Maybe I didn't. 1824, this was called the Great Storm of 1824. This was probably an EF4 tornado, or at least a violent one. Homes destroyed, passed through Henry, Wayne, and at least Randolph County in July of 1824. One settler found a gigantic beech tree that was completely twisted off 15 feet up, and the beech was about 3 to 4 feet in diameter. It's a very powerful tornado, and you can see it's a pretty long track too, passing through the forests of Henry County. It would have crossed present-day US 36. This is Newcastle right here, and that's the tornado track. I believe the next one may be 1826. That may be the Anderson area, 3 to 3.5 miles south of Anderson. And 26 and 28, almost the same place, had tornadoes. And these are pretty big tornadoes. So this area, they said, was just a complete mess of fallen timber. You can see the two tracks in the next slide. The pink is the 1828 track. Here's Anderson. And the red, the 1826 track as well. Next slide will take you forward to 1826. First tornado to hit Vincennes since its beginning that I could find. The city of Vincennes. Looks like perhaps an EF1 tornado. We had buildings damaged and destroyed. You know that beautiful Roman Catholic church in Vincennes that's very, very old? That was heavily damaged by this brief tornado. And hail and wind was reported with it as well. You can see the track here. From what I can glean, the only reports of intense damage, about a quarter mile wide, and right in the heart of Vincennes. The next one was in 1827. Again, this is the Knox County tornado. Really good detail with this one. We had a 3-mile wide path of damaging winds south of Vincennes. But we had this narrow corridor of tornado damage along the Wabash. Now, how do I know it was a tornado? Because some of the debris on the east side of the Wabash was thrown on the other side of the Wabash. So we had some sort of spin up there, and this tornado was embedded in straight line winds. And this would have been south of Vincennes, on Cathlanettes Prairie, and just north of Little Cypress Swamp, which was in southwest Knox County, in August. And you can see in the slide, I mapped it out. This is Vincennes. The tornado track would have been here. This would have been Cathlanettes Prairie here. And this would have been eastward. This is 41 right here. And these are the damaging winds associated with it. It's not uncommon to have a tornado wrapped in damaging straight line winds. And probably what this was, you know when you have a squall line of storms and you have a little comma head in the line? A lot of times you'll have a bow of damaging wind, and then in the comma head you'll have a tornado wrapped in it. So reconstructing that event in the 1820s, probably a little bow, a little comma head in a line of storms. Next slide. I hope I'm not going over. Okay, I want to make sure, because we weather guys, we'll go for 3 hours. This is the first report of a tornado in Lafayette, 1833, June 2nd, 2 to 3 miles south and east of Lafayette, moved southwest to northeast, up to half mile wide. Now, the thing is, Lafayette was tiny back then. So I tried the best I could. I tried to map out the track, and this is what it would look like today if this happened. It started likely down here. Let's see. I'm going to try to map this out for you. Downtown here. Here is 26. This is 52. There's the intersection of 20. No, this is the intersection 26 and 52. Sometimes these maps throw me off a little bit. But it's south of downtown. This is Veterans Memorial Parkway. Did a curve, and then it would end your present day, I guess this is 65 and 26 interchange. If this would happen today, this was a half mile wide tornado. This is a big one. This would be devastating to Lafayette. Next slide, 1834, called the Clay County Cyclone by pioneers. This was called the Hurricane District, southwest Posey Township. This is east of Terre Haute. Major forest damage and a few homes were destroyed. Here's the track of that tornado in Clay County. It was the southwest part of the county. This is the Terre Haute International Airport. Here's the track north of Interstate 70 right there. Next one, I believe this one's 1830. It's another Lafayette tornado. 1833, 1835, 2 tornadoes. The next one, the next tornado we had in Lafayette that I can see was not until 1858. So we had 2 in 2 years, and then we had like a 20-some year drought. Southern border of the village was the quote. Valuable timber destroyed, quarter mile wide, and we had a 2-story brick home completely destroyed. Couldn't find any evidence of injuries in the newspaper, but a home was destroyed. You can see this track would be very close to downtown. This would be 26. This is Union Street right here. Now I'm getting my bearings straight. And would pass just northeast of Columbian Park. Would start near the river and would have ended before it got to, what is that? That's, I can't even read that, but that's just south of Man, is my vision that bad? I can't even read that. When I plotted these, I knew exactly where I was plotting them, but I can't read very well today. Next slide, 1836. This is interesting. White County, the center of White County in Monticello has been hit by 3 tornadoes since its beginning. Of course, the 74 one was the worst. That was the violent one. The other two, probably more like EF1, EF2s. But the new White County courthouse was destroyed. Now, it was very small in 1836, but they just built it. Tornado wiped it out. And then at the same time, in Morgan County, this farmer wrote that he had just cleared a bunch of ground, and he had trees left in the field. You know, they used to girdle trees. They'd take all the small trees out back then, leave the big ones, girdle them, and plant corn between the stumps. Well, in 25 acres of corn he planted, he had 37 trees that were blown down in the storm, and it was May 1836. Maybe in the same day, maybe not. But at the same time, we had a major tornado, long track tornado, move through Grand Rapids, Kent County, Michigan. So it may have been the same outbreak that day. You can see in the map here, this is the only evidence I have. This is Monticello. It's just a small tract right by the courthouse. I couldn't find any other information. It was just right there that the courthouse was destroyed. Next one, 1837, Hanover College was nearly leveled by this tornado. South Hanover was in ruins, significant damage to the university and town. Also, same day in Wayne County, near Centerville, the sugar camps were prostrated. Now, what's that mean? Back then, these big sugar maple forests, they would tap them for syrup. Well, there was a path here of sugar camps that were completely destroyed. And I think, do I have time for one more, Jim?
Yeah, one more.
One more? Okay, there's the track. This is Hanover, and there's the track right through the center of it. Next one, this will be my last, there's Richmond. Can't forget Wayne County. There's Centerville, and these are the sugar camps were located. Last one, this is an interesting one. Now, I went to 1852 just in case, because I always want to have more material. I don't want to not have too little material. I want to have more than what I need. In 1838, Tipton County, this track paralleled the Palm Sunday tornado, it appears. And the town of Windfall was named after it. When you see windfall, well, those are windfall trees. You had a windfall. That, when trees are blown down, a big chunk of them, they call it a windfall. The twister killed several Native Americans when it hit the Miami Reserve, because at that time, Tipton County, you know, other than northern Newton, northern Jasper, one of the last areas in the state to be settled, because it was Miami Native American Reserve at that time. And it was a heavily wooded area, though there was a prairie in the northwest part of Tipton County. But it was that track, and you can see this in the next slide here where Windfall is. This is Windfall, and they built Windfall and built the railroad right where the tornado track was, because that's where the trees are blown down. It was a path, it was open. It had opened up the forest. There was this nice opening to build, and they cleared out all the fallen trees, and it was this zone right here that had the tornado. Of course, Tipton is down here. My goal, I've got all this data. I've gone all the way to 1905 for all the severe weather events and tornadoes in Indiana. And my goal is put it all in a book, get it published. We've got about 200, 250 pages right now of material. Because these, I just gleaned a few. There's a lot more in here. The flood of 1844. You've got hail the size of baseballs in Lebanon in 1847. So my goal is get that thing published and have all that data all in one place. So I want to thank you for letting me share with you today little bits and pieces of this. And I enjoyed putting this together and plotting these tracks. And you know, it looks like the sun is coming out now. So it's going to storm later today. So thank you. I appreciate it.
We've got time for maybe one or two quick questions.
Have you ever compiled all these plots onto one map to get a general track of stormy weather?
I have for West Lafayette and Lafayette. I need to put that back on my blog, because I plotted every tornado that's hit within the city limits of West Lafayette or Lafayette from 1833 to present. And there's it's just a mishmash of tracks, but the downtown area has been hit by 3, but they've all been like EF0s, EF1s. They unroof downtown buildings, they blow out windows. The violent ones, the ones that completely destroy structures, have been northwest of town. It's the same track. It's that Klondike to Brookston track. You should see the number of violent tracks there. They're overlaying the top of each other. And the Dayton area, too. They're like a bunch of tracks. And then you got Lafayette in the middle. It just gets a few here and there.
One more question. Camilla.
I thought you just barely mentioned Waynestown, but I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I believe Waynetown, was that the one with the fallen timber country? That may have been early in the 1800s. That may have been that tornado, because there was one that tracked from Waynetown to south of Crawfordsville. There, yeah. There was like a Waynetown to south of Crawfordsville track when pioneers arrived, and that was the fallen timber country, part of that track.
Chad, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. When you're up at 2:30 in the morning blogging,
Yes.
and if the power ever goes out, you got a light to keep.
Thank you. And if I have to check on little Hadley, because Hadley's in the stage, she's having bad dreams
There you
too.
go.
So I go in there and check on her.
The button's right there.
See,
Steady.
there we go. I can just check on her.
Okay.
Because one thing as a parent, you never sleep well once you have kids.
Even when they're adults.
Even when they're adult, yeah, I won't sleep well then.
Thank you, Chad.
I've seen you and your little girl on TV, and she's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. She takes after her mom. Not me. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Oh, see, one time I wore a mic to go out and eat. I left my mic on.